heavy steel door of the meatpacking plant creaked open, echoing through the hollow, blood-stained halls of the abandoned warehouse. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of old rust and something much worse, something sweet and metallic. Darnell Simmons tried to move his arms, but they were pinned behind his back with thick, industrial zip ties. His head throbbed. The last thing he remembered was the smell of hazelnut coffee and the friendly face of the man in the White House. Now, he was staring into the darkness of a cold room, his delivery uniform torn and dirty. Suddenly, a bright work light flickered on, blinding him. He squinted, trying to see the figures standing in the shadows. There weren't just one. There were three. They weren't wearing masks. They didn't care if he saw their faces, because they didn't plan on him ever telling anyone what he saw. One of the men held a camera. Another held a heavy leather binder. The man from the house, Wayne, walked forward, still wearing that same polite, terrifying smile. He wasn't holding a coffee cup anymore. He was holding a pair of heavy pliers and a burner phone. "You're number 41 for today, Darnell," Wayne whispered, his voice as calm as a Sunday morning. "But for us? You're the one we've been waiting for all year." Darnell tried to scream, but his mouth was taped shut. He looked at the neighbor's house across the street in his mind, remembering the tiny lens of the doorbell camera. He had stood there for 2 seconds, wondering if he should go inside. He had chosen trust, and now that trust was being paid for in blood. Wayne turned the burner phone toward Darnell's face. The red record light was blinking. "Say hello to the group, Darnell. They've heard so much about your route." As the other two men stepped out of the shadows, Darnell realized this wasn't a robbery. It wasn't about the packages in his truck or the cash in his wallet. This was a ritual, and as Wayne reached for the tape on Darnell's mouth, he didn't do it to let him plead for his life. He did it so the people watching the video could hear him scream. Just as Wayne's hand touched the tape, a loud, heavy thud sounded from the front of the warehouse. The three men froze. The smile vanished from Wayne's face, replaced by a look of pure, cold fury. He turned to the other men and hissed, "I told you we weren't supposed to be followed." Darnell's heart soared. Was it the police? Was he saved? But as the warehouse doors groaned under the weight of something heavy pushing against them, Wayne didn't run. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a black handgun, and pointed it directly at Darnell's forehead. "If they come through that door," Wayne whispered, "you're the first thing they see die." The sound at the warehouse door wasn't the police. It was a gust of wind catching a loose sheet of corrugated metal, slamming it against the frame. Wayne Prescott didn't lower the gun immediately. He stared at the door, his chest heaving, until the silence of the Oklahoma plains settled back over the building. He slowly turned his gaze back to Darnell, the murderous tension in his eyes fading back into that eerie, calculated calm. He tucked the weapon away and signaled to the other two men. They had work to do, and they had been planning this cleansing for months. To understand how Darnell Simmons ended up in a chair in an abandoned meatpacking plant, we have to go back to 2:38 p.m. that Tuesday. It was a beautiful day in Lawton. Darnell was humming along to the radio, thinking about his son Elijah's upcoming baseball game. He was a man of habit, a man of community. For 9 years, he had driven these same dusty roads, delivering everything from birthday gifts to medical supplies. He was the kind of man who would pull over to help an elderly woman change a tire or chase down a runaway dog. He believed in the goodness of people because, for 3,000 days on the job, people had been good to him. He pulled his brown truck into the driveway of a pristine, white 2-story house. It looked like the American dream. A flag fluttered on the porch. The lawn was trimmed to the inch. Darnell grabbed a small package, a box of high-end accounting ledgers, and walked to the door. He rang the bell. When Wayne Prescott opened the door, he didn't look like a monster. He looked like a lonely accountant who spent too much time indoors. He looked like someone who needed a friend. "It's a scorcher out there, isn't it?" Wayne had said, leaning against the doorframe. "I just brewed a fresh pot of hazelnut. My treat for the hardest working man in Lawton. Come in for 2 minutes, get some AC. I've got a tip for you on the counter too. Darnell hesitated. His training told him to stay at the threshold. But Wayne seemed so genuine, so harmless. Darnell looked at his watch. He was ahead of schedule. He stepped inside. The door clicked shut behind him, a sound that would later be analyzed by forensic audio experts for hours. Inside, the house was unnervingly quiet. The air conditioning was humming, but the air felt heavy. Wayne led him to the kitchen where 2 mugs were already sitting out. As Darnell reached for the mug with his name written on a sticky note, he didn't see Wayne's hand slip into his pocket. He didn't see the white powder already settled at the bottom of the ceramic cup. Darnell took 3 sips. Within 90 seconds, the kitchen started to spin. The white walls seemed to melt. He tried to reach for his scanner, but his fingers felt like lead. Is the heat getting to me? Darnell stammered, his knees buckling. Wayne didn't catch him. He watched him fall. He stood over Darnell, checking his watch, waiting for the sedative to hit its peak. As Darnell's vision faded to black, he saw Wayne pick up his phone and send a single text message to a private chat room. The message read, "The eagle is in the nest. Bring the binders." When Darnell woke up hours later, he wasn't in the White House anymore. He was in the back of a darkened SUV, bouncing over a dirt road. He could hear voices, different voices. They were laughing. They were talking about him as if he were an object, a trophy. They pulled up to the warehouse, the very place where the police would find the horror 11 days later. Wayne dragged Darnell into the center of the room and threw him into a wooden chair. But as Wayne began to set up his camera for the group, one of the other men, a taller man with a jagged scar across his knuckles, pointed to Darnell's wrist. "You forgot something, Wayne." Darnell looked down. His delivery watch, the one with the built-in GPS tracker for the company, was still ticking. It was glowing bright green. In their excitement to start the ritual, they had left a digital breadcrumb. The tall man smashed the watch with a hammer, but it was too late. The signal had already pinged a tower 3 miles away. Wayne's face twisted. He grabbed Darnell by the hair and forced him to look at the smashed watch. "You think that saves you?" Wayne hissed. He turned to his accomplices. "We can't do the full ceremony here. Not yet. We have to move him to the basement. The deep one." He grabbed a rusted chain from the wall and looped it around Darnell's neck. As he pulled the chain tight, Darnell's eyes bulged. Just as he felt the world slipping away again, he heard a muffled, frantic scratching coming from underneath the floorboards, the sound of someone, or something, trying to scream from a hidden crawl space right beneath his feet. The scratching sound from beneath the floorboards grew more frantic as Wayne tightened the chain. Darnell's boots kicked against the concrete, his heels drumming a desperate rhythm of survival. Seeing his captive struggling for air, Wayne finally slackened the iron links, letting Darnell slump forward, gasping and choking. Wayne didn't care about the noise from below. He was focused on the mistake with the GPS watch. He knew that the moment the signal vanished, the clock started ticking for the Lawton Police Department to notice a stationary, silent driver. "The crawl space," the tall man with the scarred knuckles muttered, looking toward the floor. "If he's still making noise, he's not done yet." Darnell realized with a jolt of pure terror that he wasn't the only one in the warehouse. There was someone else, another victim, hidden in the dark, damp belly of the meatpacking plant. Wayne kicked a heavy rug aside, revealing a rusted trapdoor secured with a padlock. He didn't open it. Instead, he poured a small amount of water through the crack. The scratching stopped, replaced by a low, broken whimpering that broke Darnell's heart. While the men argued about whether to stay or flee, the investigation was already beginning in the outside world. At 5 p.m., Mrs. Chun on Willow Street looked out her window for the 5th time. Her grandson's birthday gift was late. She was a woman who valued punctuality, but more than that, she knew Darnell. He was never late. She called the delivery company's main office. When the dispatcher, a woman named Sarah who had worked with Darnell for years, saw his status, her blood ran cold. Darnell's truck was marked idle at a location that wasn't a scheduled stop. Sarah tried to radio him. No response. She called his cell phone. It went straight to voicemail. By 6:15 p.m., Darnell's wife, Tamika, was standing in her kitchen, the dinner she had prepared growing cold. Her husband hadn't texted his "on my way" message. When she called the warehouse and heard the tremor in Sarah's voice, she didn't wait. She grabbed her keys and drove straight to the police station. The Lawton PD responded quickly, but they were looking for a missing person, not a crime scene. At 9 p.m., they found the brown truck. It was sitting perfectly parked in the driveway of a White House with an American flag. An officer knocked on the door. He saw the 2 coffee mugs sitting on the counter through the window. He saw the nice guy exterior of Wayne Prescott's life. But without a warrant and with no signs of a struggle, the officer did the one thing that would haunt him for the rest of his career. He left a note and drove away. Inside the warehouse, miles away, Wayne was watching the police activity on a laptop. He had hacked into the local police scanner frequencies. He laughed when he heard the officers clear the scene at his house. "They think you're just a runner, Darnell," Wayne mocked. He opened his leather binder and turned it toward Darnell. Inside were hundreds of photos, all black men, all delivery drivers, all captured in moments of vulnerability. Some photos had big, red X marks through them. "This is Clarence," Wayne said, pointing to a photo of a smiling man in a FedEx uniform from 2018. "And this is Jerome." He flipped the page to a UPS driver from 2020. "They were kind, just like you. They accepted the coffee, just like you. And now, they are part of something much bigger than a delivery route." Wayne pulled out a red marker. He hovered it over a fresh photo of Darnell, a photo taken 3 weeks ago while Darnell was eating lunch in a park. The ritual was about to begin. The other 2 men began to chant a series of numbers, dates and coordinates of previous cleansings. They moved toward Darnell with a heavy, industrial-grade stapler and a stack of printed manifestos. Wayne leaned in close, his breath smelling of stale hazelnut. "We're going to make sure the world knows why you disappeared," he whispered. He raised the stapler to Darnell's chest, but as he did, the trapdoor behind them didn't just rattle, it exploded upward. A man, skeletal and covered in filth, lunged out of the darkness of the crawlspace, grabbing Wayne's leg with a grip fueled by the last of his strength. The man who erupted from the floor was a ghost. He was Clarence Morton, the driver who had vanished in Arkansas 4 years earlier. He was unrecognizable, his face a map of scars and his eyes wide with a madness born of years in the dark. He didn't speak, he only roared, his fingers digging into Wayne's calf like iron hooks. For a split second, the power dynamic in the warehouse flipped. Wayne shrieked in terror, falling backward and dropping the stapler. The other 2 men, startled by the sudden appearance of a man they thought was broken, scrambled to help Wayne. The tall man with the scarred knuckles began kicking at Clarence, trying to pry his hands off Wayne's leg. Darnell saw his chance. With his mouth still taped but his adrenaline surging, he threw the weight of his body sideways. The wooden chair tipped, crashing onto the concrete. The impact shattered the back of the chair, loosening the zip ties around his wrists, just enough for him to pull one hand free, tearing his skin in the process. But the hope was short-lived. Wayne, now fueled by a humiliated rage, grabbed a heavy metal pipe from a nearby workbench. He didn't hit Clarence. He looked directly at Darnell, who was struggling to stand, and swung the pipe with a sickening thud against Darnell's ribs. The air left Darnell's lungs in a rush of pain. He collapsed back to the floor, the world turning gray at the edges. Wayne then turned his fury back to Clarence. He didn't kill him, that would be too easy. He dragged the skeletal man back toward the hole, whispering, "You just lost your right to watch the finale." He slammed the trapdoor shut and bolted it with 3 separate locks. Outside, the investigation was finally shifting gears. The Lawton PD hadn't just left a note. they had gone back to the station and run a deeper check on Wayne Prescott. An IT specialist in the department noticed something strange. Wayne's home business as an accountant used an encrypted server that bounced signals off 3 different countries. Then, the FBI's Violent Criminal Apprehension Program, VICAP, flagged the name. A detective in Arkansas had linked Wayne's car to the disappearance of Clarence Morton years ago, but the lead had gone cold when Wayne moved to Oklahoma and changed his legal name. By day 4, the FBI had swarmed Wayne's White House. They didn't find Darnell, but they found the basement. When they breached the false wall, they found the binder room. It wasn't just photos, it was a museum of hate. They found Darnell's scanner, smashed into pieces, and his brown uniform cap sitting on a pedestal like a trophy. But the most chilling discovery was a digital map on the wall. It didn't just have Lawton marked. It had 14 different cities across the Midwest, each with a delivery route highlighted in red. Back at the warehouse, the ceremony had reached its peak. The 3 men had spent the last 48 hours recording Darnell, forcing him to read their manifesto while they documented his physical decline. They hadn't fed him. They hadn't let him sleep. Wayne was obsessed with breaking the spirit of the man who had been so kind on the porch. He wanted Darnell to beg. He wanted him to admit that his kindness was a mistake. On the morning of the 11th day, Wayne stood over Darnell with the burner phone. "It's time for the last delivery, Darnell," Wayne said, his voice trembling with excitement. He showed Darnell the screen. It was a live-streamed chat room with a dozen participants. They were cheering. They were placing bets. Wayne reached for a large industrial hook hanging from a pulley system in the ceiling. He began to lower it toward Darnell's bound ankles. But just as the hook touched Darnell's skin, a low, rhythmic thumping began to vibrate through the warehouse walls. It wasn't wind this time. It was the sound of a twin-engine helicopter hovering less than 50 feet above the roof. The warehouse roof groaned as the downwash from the FBI tactical helicopter ripped at the loose metal sheeting. Red and blue lights began to pulse through the high, shattered windows, cutting through the darkness like strobe lights in a nightmare. Wayne Prescott froze, the industrial hook still trembling in his hand. He looked up at the ceiling, then back at Darnell, his face twisting into a mask of pure, frantic desperation. The ceremony was being interrupted, and for a man who lived for control, this was the ultimate insult. "Finish it!" the tall man with the scarred knuckles screamed over the roar of the engines. "Wayne, finish it now!" But Wayne didn't move toward the hook. He lunged for the burner phone, trying to delete the encrypted stream, his fingers fumbling as the warehouse doors at the far end of the hall exploded inward with a deafening blast of flashbangs. White light and thunder filled the room. Darnell, weakened and broken, could only press his face against the cold concrete, praying that the next thing he felt wasn't a bullet. The FBI moved with surgical precision. They didn't come in through just the doors. They dropped from the skylights on thick black rope. "FBI, drop the weapon!" The tall man reached for a hidden holster, but he was neutralized before his hand even touched the grip. The third man threw himself to the ground, sobbing. But Wayne was different. He backed away into the shadows of the meatpacking machinery, dragging Darnell's limp body with him, using the chain around Darnell's neck as a leash. He pressed the handgun to Darnell's temple, his eyes wide and glassy. "I made him a star," Wayne screamed at the wall of tactical lights. "He's part of history now. You can't take that back." For 10 agonizing minutes, the warehouse was a standoff. The lead negotiator tried to talk Wayne down, but Wayne wasn't listening to the police. He was looking at Darnell. In that final moment, Darnell opened his eyes. He looked at the man who had stolen his life and whispered 3 words, "Elijah is waiting." The mention of Darnell's son, a reminder of the human life Wayne had tried so hard to turn into a statistic, seemed to break Wayne's trance. He blinked, the gun wavering for a fraction of a second. It was all the opening the sniper needed. The aftermath of the Lawton warehouse discovery sent shockwaves through the United States. When investigators finally pried open that rusted trapdoor in the floor, they didn't just find Clarence Morton. They found the remains of 2 other men who had been reported missing years ago. Darnell Simmons was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. He had survived 11 days in that house of horrors, but the physical and emotional scars were permanent. The footage found on Wayne's burner phone, the 47 minutes of cleansing operations, became the most guarded piece of evidence in Oklahoma history. In the trial that followed, Wayne Prescott sat in the courtroom with the same polite smile he had used on his porch. He showed no remorse, even when Tamika Simmons stood at the witness stand and described the hole he had left in their family. He was convicted on 14 counts of first-degree murder, kidnapping, and federal hate crimes. He and his 3 accomplices were handed multiple life sentences, ensured to never see the sun again. But the victory felt hollow. The FBI revealed that the online group Wayne belonged to had over 200 active members across the country, many of whom are still being monitored today. Today, if you drive through the outskirts of Lawton, the White House on the corner stands empty, its windows boarded up. But the legacy of Darnell Simmons lives on in every delivery truck in the state. Because of him, drivers are now equipped with emergency panic buttons and strict no-entry policies. Darnell survived, but he never returned to the driver's seat. He now works as a safety consultant, teaching new drivers how to spot the smiling mask of a predator. He tells them his story not to scare them, but to save them. He reminds them that while most people are good, the world still contains men like Wayne Prescott, men who wait on porches with a cup of coffee and a heart full of hate. The next time you see a delivery driver walk up your path, remember Darnell. Remember the 14 seconds of CCTV footage that captured a simple act of kindness turning into a fight for survival. And remember that sometimes the most dangerous door you can walk through is the one opened with a smile. Darnell's last delivery wasn't just a package, it was a warning to the world. A warning that we must protect the people who keep our communities running, because behind any door, in any quiet neighborhood, the darkness might be waiting for its next number.